Get it rolling here. It's Matt Michaels here on the DeFalco Files with the owner and creator of FSW here in Las Vegas, Future Stars Wrestling's Vince McMahon to the Las Vegas area, Mr. Joe DeFalco. Joe, how you doing?
Better every day.
That's good to hear. And Joe, if people are just tuning in, haven't found out, Joe did have a little bout of COVID. That wasn't serious, but grounds you, makes you cough, and makes you appreciate.
Well, if being on your deathbed isn't serious, then I guess I was fine. I struggled through, I fought, and I came out on top.
Oh well,
he's got 9 lives. This guy.
That's the thing. It's interesting because you've survived COVID, you've survived heart issues. I don't know if you'll be able to survive today, because today's guest is none other than FSW's Goomba of excellence, I guess.
I prefer to call him like the jack of all trades. He's like that top utility player off the bench because he does so many things in between his stints in FSW.
And that's Mr. Sal E. Sal, how you doing, brother?
Good. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for being here. And of course, Joe, any moment to be with you is a treasure.
I know it's the highlight of your career, my friend.
It really is. It really is. I can't go anywhere from here. That's why I stopped.
It's understandable.
Well, let me ask you, Sal, how did you come about meeting Joe? What was your path to getting to FSW?
Joe, what's it, 20 something years, roughly?
Yeah, I think it was like 1999 or 2000, right in that time frame.
So I was working at the now defunct WCW Nitro Grill that used to be at the Excalibur.
What a nightmare that place was.
Whew. And it was a nightmare. It should have, Joe makes this joke all the time. Like if he would have ran it, it'd probably still be, something, it ran like 2 years, a year and a half before it finally shut the doors. I was a busboy over there, and I was a host. And one day, guy comes in, got the long hair, real smooth, Joe, and he comes in to do his radio show, to do some interviews and stuff. And I like to think we hit it off. I think he's got a different story of the whole thing, but Joe at the time was like the coolest guy in the world. Did radio shows and knew all these guys and was into wrestling, and we were from the same, background, New York and Italian and this and that. So I like to think we hit it off a little bit, and he came in all the time, and he had the radio show at the time. I used to call up every now and then. He used to take me to wrestling events with him when he got tickets. And that was it. And then we disappeared for a while. We didn't talk for, what was it, like 10 years by the time we reconnected or something like that?
Yeah, because you came a big-time actor because you did some commercials in a toilet stall. You were too good for me.
That commercial paid nice. And then I started...
Wait, hold on. What was the commercial for? What the hell?
The commercial was for Centennial Toyota. A buddy of mine was their spokesman for a little while. And he calls me up. He goes, "Hey, I got this part in this commercial." I said, "All right, fine. No problem. Works for me." And when I get there, he ends up telling me, he goes, "All right, you're going to be reading the newspaper, sitting on a stall in the Toyota dealership. And and I'm going to be on the dolly, and I'm going to pull underneath the stall. Something about you want a car or something like that. You just drop the paper in shock, make $1,000 and get your balls broken for the next 8 months while people see the commercial." At this time, too, I was doing a lot of shows on the Strip, Tony and Tina's wedding, things like that. I was doing a lot of plays, things like that. And I kind of got away from wrestling, even watching, because I was working Monday nights. I really didn't have TiVo. I wasn't taping, all that stuff. And one day I'm at work and my buddy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, there's this new wrestling federation that opened up called FSW. You want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, when is it?" And I think it was Sunday night. I think it was the second anniversary or the first anniversary at the old school on Boulder Highway. So we went. I end up seeing Joe. And we Facebooked each other. We were talking, "Sal E, my guy, how you doing? Good to see you." And as I was there that night, Dino Dinelli, who was a manager at the time, got fired. Rocky T fired him. So after the show, I go up to Joe. I said, "Looks like you're down at Dago. If you need somebody, you give me a call." We were bullshitting about it. He said, "Why don't you come down to the school and check it out?" And what? The rest is history, unless I'm telling it wrong, Joe.
No, pretty much extremely accurate. I remember telling him to come down. I remember I charged him the first month. The first month, some dues. I wanted to make sure the guy paid some dues in the business before he got an automatic roll. Because there's a lot of people who pay dues month after month after month, and they didn't get the spot. You know what I'm saying? So I met Sal E at the Nitro Grill. He was right. We were bullshitting back and forth. And even though his name is JP or John, I have never called him that ever.
I think that's maybe the second time he's ever said it.
He introduced me to me as Sal, and being the wrestling guy or whatever. I remember, Sal E Graziano. So Sal got the E added to his name that he kept. Because, I'm like the inventor of names, the gods of war, the 1%. Yep. There's so many people's names. Eddie Guardado, Tyson Prince. Like, I gave those guys their names, and the funny thing was, it was whatever, 10, 12 years later, Sally kind of stuck, and then he is now permanently known as Sal E. And that was just because it was a takeoff of some big fat ECW wrestler that had that name, and it was catchier than, if he came, and then when he came in as a manager, if he was Sal, it'd be like Sal what?
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was like, well, is he going to be Sal Raniola? Well, Sal E just sounds a whole lot better. And not that we invented it or came up with the idea that 10 years from now, I'm going to start a company and he's going to be a part of it. But
right.
That's where it ended up.
Sal, did you have any inspiration or aspirations at all to get into a wrestling ring? Were you athletic at all? Did you even conceive of, what it would feel like to, take a bump, take a stiff shot, anything like that cross your mind before getting involved?
Well, as a athletic, I'll be the first person to tell you no. Joe will be the second person to tell you.
Yeah,
no.
He couldn't even throw a snowball in the snow. You know what I
mean? My father will be the third person to tell you no. But as a kid, I was always drawn to the managers. I was never drawn to the wrestlers. I was, as we all were, but every single manager ever was always like, I always said to myself, I could do that, because they never got involved a lot. Yeah, here and there. And Heenan had a couple matches, with the weasel suit and things like that. And maybe they took a bump, this and that. I always said, yeah, I could do that. But I never really pursued it. I had a lot of guys I went to high school with who trained under Rush and Buffalo Jim. Big Unit I went to school with. A kid named Jason Elliott and John Elliott. I went to school with them. They ran around for a little while.
WW developmental guys, the Riggs.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, they were friends of mine in school. I know John, all those years. I never really thought about it. And honestly, too, when I had said it to Joe, I was really kind of just breaking balls.
Sure.
I was, just jonesing around with him. When he said, come down and let's talk, I said, you know what? Let me just go down and talk. Even if I could just hang around and, just be around and be part of it, even if nothing comes to it, I think that's going to be cool as anything.
Right.
And I remember, like Joe said, I went to a week and a half of training, and half of me went, you know what? I don't think, not that I couldn't. I said, I don't think I want to do this.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in me to do that. Not even the so much athletic thing, but I was like, I don't want to roll around and run against ropes and do all that shit. Like, I want to, if I'm going to do this, I want to go out there and just yell and scream and make faces,
Right.
But you get sucked in a little bit. You really do kind of get sucked in to it. And at the time, Michael Modest, who I managed first, took me through a lot of stuff and was real easy on it. And, he even told me at the time, he's like, you just got to learn a couple things and we'll go from there. But I remember when Joe told me, he's like, all right, we got about a month and then we're throwing you in there because we got to take care of this. I've done about 100 shows in my life, like stage and screen and stuff like that. And I got to say, and I've said this before, there is nothing like that still to this day. Going out there in front of that crowd is one of the best. It's one of the craziest feelings in the world because they're invested week to week to week to week. And that first time I went out, nobody knew who the hell I was. I got boos. I got cursed at. I got things. This is my first night. Just for the fact that I was aligned with Modest and Delight. And I said, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. I can basically do whatever the hell I want. They're going to yell and scream or they're going to laugh. I love this.
That's wonderful in terms of you're recognizing that you can get people in a wrestling crowd, unlike a stage show, right? You do play. There's no reaction. The only time you've done well is if you read a critique or have an audience member come up to you and tell you, and you get the instant gratification and payoff there in a wrestling crowd. Now, Joe, putting Sal with Modest, what was the idea behind that and starting that up? And did it help to have someone like Mike, being a veteran that he was and having so much experience, that Mike could kind of guide Sal? Was that part of the thought?
Well, let's go back to when he first came in. Now, most people who come in have no experience at anything. Even though he had zero athletic ability, as he said, he's done a bunch of shows. He's been in front of people. He knows how to talk. So the transition is a lot simpler when you have a theater background. It's like, when Cross came in, he had a jiu-jitsu MMA background. So it's easier to adjust. Same thing with Dave Mazzani and guys like that. And we have a new kid, Brett the Threat, we call him. And, he worked with both Mazzanis in the past. And he adapted a lot quicker. So just hearing Sal E, but at the time he became the nephew of Dino Dinelli. So I also helped with the boos because he had a recognizable name and he pitched as Dino Dinelli, who wasn't like's nephew, Sal E Dinelli taking over the family. So that was, the first step. And then putting him with Modest, who is the grizzled vet, it's almost like Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan. Nick Bockwinkel was one of the best talkers in the game. But with Bobby Heenan by his side, Heenan said all the certain things that needed to be said, and Nick Bockwinkel just chimed in, maybe put over the opponent to where, it became a much bigger, matchup. So since Sal was coming in basically as a baby, you know, we had to bring him along, and bringing him along with Modest, who can take over a room with the microphone at any time. If there's any slip ups, any glitches with Sal E, it's easy to be hidden because guys like Mike Modest, guys like Disco Inferno, which has done it on numerous occasions when guys are in the ring that were inexperienced, like Johnny Ferrari, who thought he was the talker of all time. You know, same thing with Stu Stone. They know how to grab a microphone and take back control of a situation. And, you know, Stu's another one, movie actor from 8 years old, Donnie Darko, making movies. So he was an easy transition. And Sal was the same way, by having the background, by being able to do it. You know, he may have been nervous doing it, but he was comfortable in what he was doing. And, you know, took direction well. Hey, this is where we're looking to go. And the thing was, early on, he didn't have to take any bumps. We try to keep him safe. And that was part of the reasoning for the wrestling school. You know, it's like, hey, we need you to train because, yeah, you're not going to take bumps and you don't need to do anything off the top rope. But we just want to get you comfortable in there. And, you know, so when Sean Ricker is thrown into the ring, you know how to grab the rope instead of grabbing the concrete with your head.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So Sal, when Joe references that, what exactly happened? And let's hear, actually, Joe, let's hear your recollection of that first, and then Sal kind of, you know, fill in what was going on and how bad of a landing that was for you, man.
Yeah, it was a little cloudy for me other than that part. Like, I forgot who Ricker was wrestling. It turned out, I believe, was Sugar Brown, correct?
Yep.
And after the match, I guess Sal got in Ricker's face, now known as Eli Drake. And when he grabbed him, he tried to throw him out of the ring. And because Sal missed 5 or 6 classes, especially the one to where to protect yourself, Sal went straight over and then landed straight on his head on the hard concrete floor at the Boulder Highway School. And let me tell you, when he got up, hey, you okay? And it's just like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. He looked like Pat Mahomes a couple of weeks ago when he landed on his face in the Kansas City game. Like, Sal was out of it for a bit.
Oh, I was, so like Joe said, yeah, we were fighting Ricker. And I threw the bat in for Suge, so Suge could grab it and knock out Ricker. Ricker grabbed it, reversed it. After I realized it, I went in to check on Suge. And like Joe said, I thought I was a badass, and I squared up to Ricker. Ricker grabs me and catapults me. And in my head, I said, oh, I got this. I know what I got to do here. And if you watch the video, I don't. And I missile dropped straight. There was a moment when I went through the ropes where I actually saw God. And he goes, I'm going to save you, but I'm also going to teach you a fucking lesson. And I hit that concrete. And from what I remember the fans telling me at the time was that it sounded like 40 pounds of fucking coconuts falling off the Empire State Building. And I remember, I still till this day remember the sound. And I was out. I mean, I remember being out. And the next thing I remember is fucking Paulie Cover standing over me laughing, taking pictures. Like Joe Pesci in the public eye, just taking fucking pictures. And then he realized that maybe it wasn't as funny as we thought it was.
Man.
No, it was as funny as we thought it was.
Oh, no. Well, Matt, if you ever, I'll send you the video.
Go to FSW Network and you can see it.
Yeah.
And you can see it. Joe, Disco actually sounds a little bit concerned, whereas DeFalco, you could tell that there is piss running down his leg in a constant stream because he is laughing so fucking hard. And The next day he writes me, he's like, something, I hope you're okay. And then he proceeds to break my balls for a half hour on Facebook Messenger. But that was the day I realized that I didn't always do everything correctly to get to where I had to be. So after that, I started learning a little more and learning a little more and doing a couple more things. But that was like, in my entire run, that's the worst day that's ever, from losing belts to anything else, that was possibly the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It was a rough day.
Joe, when you're on commentary like that and you're seeing someone not through the eyes of a competitor or a student or someone you're just doing business with, but someone who is a personal friend of yours that you go back a decade at that point, and you see this happen, how do you try controlling yourself in terms of being professional but yet still getting one hell of a laugh out of what happened?
I'd have to look back and see, because to be honest, I'm not sure we were doing live commentary at that time.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure I was just in the back watching it, being like, holy fuck, he landed on his head, because initially you want to start laughing, but then you heard the conch of the head hitting the concrete, and you're thinking, oh fuck, because prior to that, in the first show we ever did, there was a guy, Devin Walker, who was a referee, who was on the outside. And Funny Bone, for some reason, he had this other young kid that was there, and it was a battle royal. And for some reason, Funny Bone's idea was for the unknown kid who's never had a match to go over, climb to the top rope, and basically do like a move, basically do a crossbody, whatever it was, to eliminate himself, which first off makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And Funny Bone explains it as, well, I wanted to give the kid a moment. It's like, well, nobody knows who the kid is. I'm looking at it as like, who's this idiot who eliminates himself? Well, he goes off from the top rope, cross bodies, the Devin Walker guy, as he's trying to catch him, who's pretty much had no matches. He was a referee who's transitioning into a wrestler, falls down, hits the back of his head on the concrete. As the battle royal's going on, we keep the battle royal going on. Blood is dripping from the ears of Devin Walker.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Somebody's going to die the first fucking show. Where's Sal E so we can bury the body somewhere, And,
he wasn't around yet.
Yeah. So we did call 911, and as the guys as the paramedics were removing Devin Walker, I remember Cyanide going over the top rope and having to avoid landing on Devin Walker because the show went on. It was probably the first match of the show. It was the Battle Royal with all the young kids mixed in with stuff. So, I understood that, Sally landing on his head, it was funny at the time, but you knew it could have been serious, between that and Sally almost choking to death on a piece of pizza at the school. He hasn't had a great run in FSW, despite all the accolades. And
it wasn't even good pizza either.
Yeah, it was shitty stuff.
What the hell?
Yeah. Don Antonio's was one of our sponsors.
Okay.
And they sent over a few pizzas one day. I think we were shooting vignettes and interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah, their food was really good. The pizza was nothing.
Okay. So, being a fat bastard that I am, I grabbed a couple slices. So I start eating this. And I start choking. Everybody, including Mr. D over here, they think I'm breaking balls. And then they realize that I'm not. And still to this day, we thank Darian.
Can't thank him for a lot, but we thank him for that.
Darian gives me the Heimlich, saves my life. So I'm here because of him. So the two worst things, I forgot, I don't block out the Ricker thing, almost, cracking my head open. I do block out the choking on the pizza.
I just wonder if anybody picked up the piece of pizza that you coughed up and actually ate it right after.
Probably. I'm sure Zuniga did.
Yeah, there you go.
When you think about how you were getting into the mix, Sal, what for you was kind of the highlights of your first year or so in terms of, were there certain storylines or people that you worked with? What was it that, because within that first year, you have a make or break point where you're like, hey, I really love this, or maybe I'll try something else in the business. And you obviously excelled into management. So what were the steps for you in terms of that? Who did you feel comfortable with? And, who were, the guys that kind of, kept your motor running where you're like, yeah, I want to keep doing this.
Modest was a big one. Modest used to make me laugh incredibly. Like he was always, especially when we were out there. Alcatraz was huge because that we were having, my first feud was Modest and Alcatraz. And one of my favorite matches still was they had a Falls Count Anywhere weapons match in the old place. And out behind the old school, Modest found a shopping cart. So he's like, the hell with it, we're bringing this out there. And totally on the spot during the match, Modest goes, get in the shopping cart. I said, okay. And I used to carry a cane at the time because that's what Dino carried. And he goes, we're going to joust him. I said, what? He goes, get in a joust position. So I put the whistle in the mouth. I'm in the fight. I'm in the thing. I got this. And we literally jousted Alcatraz. And it was one of that was like the first really big where I went, you know what? This is going to be fun if everything goes well. Alcatraz was always great, like always a lot of advice. Rush was always fun. I loved actually working with Rookie of the Year, Mike Delight. Mike Delight's the reason why I got to wear a dress for 6 months. Because that's what managers do. If my guys have to wear a dress, then I'm going to wear a dress. It was a lot of meeting Disco Inferno, who as a kid, I was probably his only fan, as big as I was. Like it just on from there, Bryce Harrison, Remy was huge. Even at the time then, he was always real supportive and real cool. Cody at the time, my first kind of real friend, funny enough, was Greg Romero. For some reason, we hit it off swimmingly. He was a kid at the time. He was 18, I think, or 19 at the time.
Wow.
And then, just every week, Joe threw me to Suburban Commandos. I mean, that was a wild trip every time they came in. I mean, working with them was absolutely excellent as well. I got to say, too, I was very blessed in the beginning with Joe taking so much, what's the word I'm looking for? He took a lot of stock in me. He was really like, he saw something and he kind of just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. He knew how to write for me, and then it stopped. He's like, nope, just say this and that. I always took what he said because everything he said was always right. I pepper in things here and there. But I was very blessed in that because Joe always, the next opportunity for me was always better than the last one.
That makes sense.
And everybody he put me with, as the years go on and you think about it, it was always very calculated. You know, and he always said that to me. He always said, I'm not just going to throw you with somebody. Like, it's got to have a purpose to be in there. That's why with the whole Tyshawn thing, I was floored. You know, that first night that he came out and he squashed the light, and we made the dynasty start to happen. You know, yeah, it was like I never had, that first year just got better and better and better and better every single time. Like, I figured out who I was. He used to give me notes and tell me this and tell me that. Modest would tell me Alcatraz, and I take little bits and pieces here and there. And that's when I actually started watching wrestling again. I was going back and watching a lot of old stuff, watching Heenan and watching Dylan and watching guys like that, and trying to figure out sort of the magic of it. Because when I first started, I only knew how to perform sort of one-on-one.
Yeah.
As far as, you know, I was a stage performer, or, you know, I didn't think about everything around me. And you start to, you know, and then you start to realize, at least for me, you're not the attraction.
Yeah.
The guy. So how far do you go? Because there are times I look back at a lot of my stuff and I'll say, boy, I kind of took away, you know, you could see me turning around and talking to the crowd at certain points. I'm like, well, I shouldn't have done that. So, you know, I try to box it up a little bit, because you start to realize, and that's what it is for me, is, and I always said this to anybody, I'm like, no, they're the attraction. I'm the sideshow. I'm there when I'm needed, you know, and when I'm not needed, facial expressions, banging on the mat, you know, little yelling and screaming, and not getting involved too much. And I can say this, I feel like I've sometimes gone a little too far.
Sure.
When I should have stayed back a little bit.
With that, Joe, and thinking of you know, Al just saying, like, wearing a dress or anything like that in terms of manager stipulations, was there anything that you've had Sal do that you just absolutely loved as a stipulation, and B, was there anything that you did that didn't work, or maybe you scrapped before you actually went through with it?
Well, I think the best part was there was a match with Tyshawn where if Tyshawn won at Samstown, he got 5 minutes alone with Sal E. And, you know, if you see the pictures, it's hilarious because, like, Hammerstone and Graves are in the picture, you know, and Paulie's in the picture and stuff like that. Because at that point, we had done the double switch where Tyshawn became the babyface, and Alcatraz, that's how he got the title back, was joining the dynasty. And when you had mentioned to me, hey, we're going to have Sal E on, you know, this week, and I'm like, oh, great, it's going to be a repeat of Lawson's podcast. We were already on doing stuff. So it's giving me, you know, trying to think of some different things that, hey, if you don't bring up that maybe we could talk about, that it's not rehashing almost the same podcast. And being a fan of the factions that I've always been, the Following, the Hater Nation, you know, they were always based, you know, the Hater Nation started, it was Hater and Legacy. And then Mr. Smith was like their valet manager kind of guy because he was their friend. Then we added Kenny King, and then we added Sugar Brown. But the dynasty was always a revolving door that was led by Sal E. He was the only constant that was always a part of it. And, you know, early on, it was Tyshawn and the Commandos. But also Saiku became a part of it, and Sugar Brown became a part of it, and then Alcatraz became a part of it. So the dynasty was really the only faction that they were all interchangeable, and it was based on where Sal E was going, you know. And when he talks about, you know, giving him the opportunities, the thing was, when I talked earlier and I said, you know, he's our, you know, top utility player, because it was like, we kind of ran its course with the manager gig for a little while. He kind of stepped in the role of being the co-host with Paulie Cover for years on High Octane, you know, and we always talk about the chemistry of Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan. And there was that similarness to those two, Paulie and Sally, because they ended up, because of FSW, became great friends. So they would joke, they would laugh. You know, neither one of them had ever an issue on being the goof guy. You know, sometimes people get, you know, I don't want to, you know, these guys, you know, they would take it for the team, you know, if it would enhance the thing. But then also we would bounce around on commentary. So Sally kind of stepped in and, you know, did some, you know, did some commentary. I would do the play-by-play and he would do the color. So Sal kind of fit some roles, but deep down, he always wanted to be a manager, you know, and then we had to kind of come up with an idea because, as he said, I didn't want to throwing him some random guy we brought in from California, Arizona for a couple of matches. So, you know, that's when all of a sudden, you know, the Bonus Boys became a mainstay for Sally and won the tag titles with him. And, you know, it was an easy story. Sugar Brown and Sally were in the dynasty together, you know? So as things went, you know, so did Sally. It's like, hey, I need this role. I need that role. But I was always confident because I know he'd do a good job in all of them. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't a manager, wasn't the most exciting thing for him doing the other stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure he would have loved to do the other stuff, but still be a manager. But at that time, you know, sometimes we didn't have something for him. Sometimes his schedule caused him not to be there as often. And I'm not wanting to stick a mainstay guy with a manager who may or may not be able to make it, you know, how many times this month, or, you know, can he make the big show? So it's like, it's easier to do a pre-tape. It's easier to do commentary because sometimes we didn't do it live, you know, and the hosting, all we needed him to do was come in with Paulie and they could film a couple of weeks of High Octane, do some skits, and, you know, he was off to do his thing. So that's why he was the MVP for a while, you know.
What does that mean to you, Sal, in terms of the process of adjustment? I know, you know, as actors, we tend to, you know, be given something that we'll work on, let's say for 6 months, that's comedy, and then turn around and now you're working on something that's totally dramatic for, you know, 3 months. And also sometimes you're the star and sometimes, you know, and I love being a character actor because of the fact that I get the moments, but I'm not the star, very much like a manager in wrestling, you know. For you, was there a transition in taking your skills and putting it towards commentary or putting it towards hosting that gave you an opportunity to explore different things that you might not have explored just being a manager?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I can't argue with Joe. I remember the first time I was a little upset that I wasn't going to be in the show, but then
Sure.
you don't, it's a one note thought because you think I'm not going to be in the show, but it has nothing to do with not being part of the show.
Sure. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like I thoroughly enjoyed hosting that show with Paulie Cover. It's probably one of the biggest highlights of my time in FSW, like on another side. The hardest adjustment I had to make was commentary.
Okay.
That was a little difficult for me. But then I realized, oh, I'm with Joe, so I just got to think we're just breaking balls. And, you know, he would rein me in. You know, he would tell me, hold on, I'm calling the match. You know, I mean, he would, and I needed that because I had never done anything like that.
Sure.
You know, yes, it's improv, but I'm thinking in my head constantly, pulling a Heenan, trying to make jokes, but forgetting Joe's also calling the match that is important. No matter what the match is, whether it's a storyline or it's just a match, it's all very important. But I was always part of the show in some way or another. And I started to realize that that's what's important.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean being a manager. You know, if I'm hosting, there was one show that he had me do interviews backstage.
Yeah, that was in Sam's Town where we were doing live stuff. And that was good day that day. That worked really well.
Yeah, that was like one of our first Twitches, I think, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Like and that was a lot of fun. And because I'm not changing character.
Right.
That was the other thing. I always said to myself, well, how do I adjust? And I said, well, wait, I don't adjust. Who I am going to the ring is who I am interviewing, Beast or Funny Bone or whoever the hell. And it's the same thing on commentary with him. So, there was that little transitional period because you do think about, I don't get to be out there, but you are. You know, people watch the show, and we had the show on the CW at the time. And, people would DVR it and they watch it. And honestly, Paulie and I used to put a lot of thought into some of that stuff. And what was great about Joe was at the time, he'd go, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like he didn't put a lot of restriction on what we would do. Maybe he didn't always see it. He's like, it's a little goofy, but he never said no. The thing about Joe is Joe will give you a lot of freedom in things. He also has a lot of say in things, as he should, but he doesn't hold back 100%. He lets you try things, or he's open to hearing stuff. And, like a boss or an owner does in any situation, if he don't like it, he's gonna, no, that doesn't work. We're doing it my way.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. But, I loved every single thing that I've had to do, and like Joe said, there were times early on and even later on that I was, personal issues or work issues where I couldn't always be there. And I understood the things he had to do. Was I pissed? Of course I was pissed. Who's not going to be pissed? But then you got to look at it and go, I can't be mad at him. I got to be mad at myself because I couldn't do what I had to do.
Right. Joe, let me ask you about commentary. When you're working with someone on commentary that is a actual in-ring talent, i.e. the Jesse Ventura type, even Bobby Heenan had, in-ring experience before he became a manager. Is it easier to call with someone that has the in-ring experience that can powder out the image, make it more complete for the viewer in terms of that knowledge? Or is it more fun for you when you have someone that does a great job for you in terms of a role that Sal had as manager, and then you bring them onto your commentary because you guys are friends? Is that just a lot easier being able to bust each other's balls, or is it just a totally different animal between the two types of color commentators?
Well, first off, it's like if we take a look at people who have been by my side in commentary, there is a huge potpourri of people. We had Disco Inferno early on. He was probably one of the main guys that I dealt with on commentary. Disco sometimes would drift off because at the time maybe we had some younger guys and they weren't selling very well. And the one thing that Disco instills when he's training is the sell. You got to sell your ass off. And it's like going back and forth, move here, move there, no sell, no sell. You could almost see Disco losing interest in the match at that point. Okay. Then you get a guy like D'Lo Brown. And D'Lo who's now back as a color guy on Impact. he takes a very, very serious approach. And then we had Jack Slammy, he'd fill in, and he would just try to throw in a joke because he really didn't know the product, other than he knew the guys, but he didn't know storylines. He was just trying to be funny, you know.
Yeah.
That's Sin Bodie. My personal favorite has always been Stu Stone. Like, there was just some kind of chemistry with Stu, one of the funniest dudes I know. He loves wrestling. You know, here was a guy, you know, it was serious, but it was also ball busting. I think that was the one that was like the biggest, because Stu can be funny all the time, but he knows his shit. So
Yeah.
I prefer guys I could have fun with and joke. But then recently we had Austin Aries, and Austin Aries at the Mecca is so knowledgeable about things. That was the first time we tried a 3-man booth. And Jake, who's been my main color guy, but he's not, because I try to put forth the stories of what's going on, making people who are new understand why, you know, Ice Williams and Funny Bone are beefing, you know, because if it's just match into match into match into match, you could see that anywhere, you know, and we're trying to tell the story. And Aries added so much. But with Jake, Jake's the color guy who, anytime I'm not around, is the play-by-play guy, because Jake's the move guy. He knows the names of the moves. And whether it's a Japanese, you know, I'll call it a suplex, he'll call it something else because that's the cooler given name, you know. And he kind of, we're kind of like 50-50, that even though I'm the play-by-play guy with Jake, he probably talks 60% of the time. You know, I cover stories, I cover the counts, I cover some of the moves. So every combination of guy, Sal was similar to the Stu, with less constant on the actual wrestling. You know, Sal E portrayed himself more as Sal E. He was, I was always busting balls. He's a heel, so he's going to cut down the baby face. So that's where kind of the banter would go, where I would try to have to defend, you know, at the time Remy Marcel, and then, you know, Sal E would bury him. Then all of a sudden they became buddies and they both started burying me. Figure that out. I was the one defending that prick Remy Marcel. And now all of a sudden Sal E's his buddy. You know, figure that out. That's why I always say Remy is one of the biggest turncoats in the history of FSW.
I thought that.
But commentary wise, there's been so many who have come through, guest guys. I remember at Rush's school doing commentary with Rico, you know, and I've been fortunate that I've had the opportunity to have so many talented, you know, people in the business that have come out. Matt Hardy's done commentary on our show. You know, we've had Kevin Cross do commentary, you know, so, you know, it's all different. Like, I think I would rather have it the way I have, where sometimes it's really serious. Sometimes it's half serious and half joking. It keeps things spiced up. It keeps things entertaining, because the bottom line is we're trying to entertain. And that's why Sally and Paulie would try to do their little skits, or Mike Modest would drink a thing of bleach. That was hilarious. To this day, every time I see it flash on the thing, one of the funniest things I've ever, you know, and it's amazing, especially in the early days, what we did with, you know, we don't have a lot now, but we had zero back then. And we created a lot of fun and a lot of great moments.
It was a world.
You know,
I mean,
I would really be safe to say that the first half of FSW to the second half had a lot more cool, wacky moments that we could go back to. Yeah, the wrestling now might be better in terms of the quality of guys and where they're at, but the freedom, as he said, of being able to do that weekly show and just come up with stuff and, you know, throw it against the wall. we were fortunate where a lot of it actually did stick.
For you, like you said, Sal, it was creating a world unto you guys, your own environment where you have personalities and characters, and any good wrestling show, that's what it feels like, kind of like taking a look into someone's high school or someone's workplace. It's really what wrestling kind of is. For you, are you glad that you get the opportunity to work with Joe in terms of the idea that you can be as creative as you can extend that character, whereas sometimes promoters will either hold you back, or promoters will you know basically just favor three guys, and these are their guys, and that's how everything's going to be, period. Does that creativity open you up to being able to explore and do other things with who Sal E really is?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because like when Joe asked me to host the Hall of Fames that we've done, that's a different side of Sal E. That's 75% Sal E, and the rest, the real guy. It's
Right.
it's yeah, I've always felt that I was able to be as creative as I mean, look, Joe kind of built Sal E in the beginning. I mean, my first entrance music was The Sopranos, and we talked about wearing the jumpsuit, the tracksuit that I wore
Yeah.
all those years. We talked about all that, and the gold chains, and taking the cane and the whistle to sort of mimic Dino, and then it kind of went into, all right, well, that's kind of done. So now that you have Tyshawn, now let's move it a little more. And I kind of got, I got grislier and tougher, and I started bringing out the bat, and I ditched the whistle, so.
And you dropped the last name.
Dropped the last name, and that was kind of it too. Like once that Dinelli kind of left, which don't get me
Right.
wrong, that's what got me in the door.
Right.
So I don't regret it, or I don't hate it. That's what got me in the door, was all of that. And funny enough, that whistle got me more heat than I did. People hated that whistle. Like that was all I had to do was blow that for no matter what, and they hated it. And then it just, once Dinelli dropped, and then, Modest and Delight, everything started to shift. I started bringing in the bat and Tyshawn, and things just got tougher and grislier, and it was more of a gang mentality as opposed to management. We stepped up with the family, the dynasty, running this more of a mafia organization, if you will. But I always
let me ask you really quick on that idea of mafia, Sopranos, and what you as an actor are drawing from. Is there anyone in your family that was representative of that type of character?
We don't discuss things like that.
I see it. I gotta go, Matt. I can't talk about this. No, but I mean, growing up in New York, growing up in an Italian American family, I mean, everybody's pretty much a loudmouth, and the Sal E character is a little bit of a character I did in Tony and Tina's Wedding.
Sure.
Which was a little bit of my father, just amped up a little bit. But no, I used to throw quotes from Goodfellas and Bronx Tale and Sopranos. Like I would just pepper them out. I would change them up as Sal E. It's not that hard to play,
Yeah.
And then later on, a little bit of Joe would be in there. Sally would throw out a couple of O's here and there, so that was my homage. That was my homage to Mr. DeFalco. It's an easy character to play, and I loved it. I love Sal. Like it's very important to me. It's very special to me. I've never moved out of FSW. FSW is my home. There have been other organizations in this town that have asked me to do things I never have. This is where I am. This is where, my loyalty goes, I mean, but Sal E is an asshole. He always has been. No matter if he tried to be a face, which never worked, he's still deep down an asshole. And that's where the fun is.
Let me ask you, Joe, for you, in terms of storylining and being creative, how much does having a jack of all trades mean to you, knowing that you can, place him where you need him? And how much of a value does the manager role have for you as someone who's being creative? Are you able to use that manager role to then elongate stories so that, things will play out maybe 6 months later, 9 months later, a year later?
The one thing you got to understand is with FSW, we're dealing with a lot of younger talent. We're not dealing with guys that have been in the business for 15 years. So the last thing that a young up and coming wrestler really, when they get it, is their personality, is their character, is their ability to make people enthralled in what they have to say. When we first started running, we immediately knew that Sean Ricker had it. Yeah. Sean Ricker was presented as a heel, but because he would always say something very interesting, it was funny because you would watch the crowd shut the fuck up when the heel was cutting down the babyface. But when he was wrestling the babyface, they would boo him out of the building in the match. But, a lot of times you see nowadays, it happened at the last show we did, Class started talking, and they basically shut him down and almost wouldn't let him talk. And he was going to wrestle. And it was the return of Sefa Fatu. So it was a great moment for the fans, and Class was the perfect villain. I'd like to have been able to have had him for the last 6 months running regularly, because I think Class is going to be the top heel that we have, in the company. But when you look back and you see the young guys like the Shoguns, the Hero Luz, the Jordan Cruzes, even like the young guys like Creature Feature got Primo, because they're young guys trying to find themselves as wrestlers. I've always been huge fan of tag teams and managers, and I've always utilized managers as often as I possibly could. Sometimes the guys who try to become managers just weren't very good, so I didn't use them. I wasn't that enamored with them that I'm going to use a shitty dude or a girl just because, we need to have a manager. We want to give somebody the ability to talk. Tyshawn was a big monster. The monster didn't need to talk. We had somebody do the talking for him. All we expected Tyshawn to do was take care of business. Saiku, for example, he was, the Asian guy. You didn't know a lot about him. Could he speak English? Of course he could, but it was the mystery. So, But bottom line was he could talk English, but he wasn't a great talker. He wasn't even a good talker. So being a part of a tag team with Sugar Brown, they became tag team champions. Now, is it possible they may not have been tag team champions if they were together without a manager? It is definitely possible, because Sal's job was to get the baby faces intertwined with the heels and make people want to give a shit. If the fans don't care, then what are we doing it for? Right. So, one thing, if you look at our tag division, is as deep can be. And, unfortunately, other than Primo at this moment, there's guys who need managers, but things are going on. MK is not as available as we'd like, being that he's kind of invested in the FSW. We would use him as often as possible, but he can't make a lot of shows. And Sal E's run into some issues where he hasn't been able. So there's nobody consistent there to, put together. Will there be another dynasty? Will there be another faction led by a manager? And I would bet yes, but we got to be able to find that person, or we have to be able to have that guy or girl ready. Because like even with the following, Shelly Martinez, being that they had 4 or 5 guys, the following was this cool little group, but she really binded everything together. They'd be outside, not really knowing how to interact because they weren't managers, they were wrestlers. And she was able to put them as one unit. And that's what the factions need to be. They don't need to be 4 individuals. They need to be one unit. So with Sal E, he always had his unit. Shelly was, I didn't get that one. I must have said something funny.
Yeah, he said Sally's always had his unit. So
always.
Yeah.
And before that, we had Stu Stone with the Family Stone that he created first. And then Robbie E became a part of the Family Stone. And now he stole it and uses it in NXT.
Yeah.
Anytime you see Stu Stone say, oh, man, that Robbie E Family Stone, they are awesome. That'll rile Stu right up, I'll tell you.
Let me ask you, you mentioned Class, which is, his character is very much the classic heel villain, the robe, good looking, physical guy who is, at that Rick Rude type sense as well because of his look. Would someone like Sal, given his ability to adapt and understand character, could you take someone like him and put him with a guy like Class and essentially have, Sal morph into a different type of Sal like you did? So you had, the Italian, the full-blooded Italian, you had the street guy. Could you see a character like that evolving into a manager that's more about, class and money and being better than you, in that type of light? Is that something that you could do, is take a manager and literally adjust him to, or her to the, the talent or the faction that you want to adjust them to?
Honestly, no. I think could he manage Class? Yeah, but I wouldn't want him to have to adjust to Class. Bobby Heenan managed Rick Rude differently than he managed the Island. So it's an adjustment, but Bobby Heenan was still always Bobby Heenan. Now, what he did outside the ring may have been a little different, but Bobby Heenan talked and acted the same way, regardless if it was Hercules as his protege or the Heenan family, and as we stated earlier, we were talking about Heenan with Nick Bockwinkel. Believe me, Class is no Nick Bockwinkel, but Class can speak and he could talk. So you also want what would be considered the best fit, Right. Now, how fast are we pushing Class? What are we looking to do? Obviously, Brett the Threat, for example, who's had 2 or 3 matches. Putting him with Sal E is not something I'd even consider, because this kid has to grow, and his growing pains are getting his ass whooped in the ring and see how he reacts. There's always been a few people that have talked about, hey, I'd like to manage that guy. And it's like, no disrespect to that guy, but that guy's not winning very many matches. So I'm not going to put a manager in with a guy who's a loser. Not that he is a loser, but he's perceived as a loser. And you know, it was like the Red Rooster. You know, everybody knew he could wrestle from WCW, and that was the only feud the Brooklyn Brawler ever won in his life.
Yeah.
And, you know, they jumped the gun, put the Red Rooster with Bobby Heenan, and whatever it was, they decided they wanted to bury the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor, you know, who they've thankfully, you know, he made out great. His career ended up sucking as a wrestler, and he's been a backstage main guy for the last 30 years. So, you know, he did well for himself. But the difference is, you know, you want the right people in the right spot, you know, and in some cases, you know, it's a baby face. You know, we have Sky High, two young guys, you know, looking at them as like the Hardys. So when Alita was kind of ready, she wasn't really ready for matches yet, but she was ready to be on the show. Hey, she could be like the Lita to the Hardy Boys Sky High. And that ended up working, you know. And, you know, right now, since we're trying to bring Strella along, a big monster, you know, woman wrestler, we've brought her in, and she's now managing the women's champion Maserati, who is undersized, never stops talking. She perfectly needs someone of that stature. It's almost like Shawn Michaels and Diesel.
Right.
You know, not that they've been to that level yet, but, you know, Shawn at his best with Diesel by his side. You know,
right.
I never liked Shawn Michaels as babyface anyway. So, because you knew he was a prick, so it was hard to like him. So when he played the heel, it was like, yeah, that's really the guy that if you ran into him at the airport, he'd tell you to go fuck yourself, you know?
Right.
And that's how I always looked at any guys I managed. I was always the little mousy one with the big mouth. And I always had my monsters, but like I always used to say to Sal, I don't fight, I talk. When I talk, they fight. That was how I always played it. Like, that's why, if you ever see, I was never really afraid of anybody until everybody else's back was turned and they were coming at me. That's
right.
that was one thing I always loved too, was being able to just talk as much shit as I could. And I always had them around me to do whatever the hell I needed to do.
And that's how I booked it with the first Dinelli that was nephew of Dino and Fredo Dinelli.
Fredo, I saw Fredo.
Well, you were getting a tan?
Nah, he comes into, never mind.
I got
you. He comes into the joint.
It comes into the joint. I got
you. Sal, as we start to kind of look here of wrapping up a little bit, what is your like favorite memory that comes to your mind of anything that you've been a part of either FSW or in your personal relationship with Joe? Is there a certain story or a funny moment that stands out to you?
You know, Matt, as far as FSW goes, I don't have one. I mean, between being on the Lava Lounge 3 or 4 times, getting to manage Tyshawn when he fought Kevin Nash. I mean, that was huge. Getting the stink face from Rikishi was, I mean, when Joe told me that, half of me was scared and the other half was, you know, a 14-year-old on Monday night watching Raw, you know? I mean, one of my first big matches was against the Young Bucks. Like, I have meeting Jake, you know, meeting D-Lo, you know, meeting just all these people that FSW has given me the opportunity. Like, I don't have a favorite moment. They've all been, and everybody I've worked with, you know, from Tyshawn to the Commandos to Clutch and Suge, you know, to Remy, to Paul. Like, there's no real one moment that I can nail down. They've all just been this one great, you know, I've said this before. If something happened and Joe's like, look, I don't need you anymore, it's been a great run. You know, if that ever happened, I can honestly say that there's nothing that I haven't gotten to do in this business that I'm not completely ecstatic and just over the moon that I've got to do.
That's great to hear, because I was going to tell you right after.
This is
I had
it.
something to tell you.
I'm getting the pin.
Since we're here now,
Should I open?
enjoy those future endeavors.
I think I just endeavored myself.
Gigi Severe's coming back, and he's taking your spot, my friend.
Oh, Gigi. I think he still owes me 25 from that dinner at Don Antonio's.
I'm pretty sure he does.
As far as Joe,
We got a lot of history from the Nitro Grill, hanging out with David Flair and Stacy Keebler in the back when I was trying to do an interview because there was some kind of fireman's ball where they had dates or something.
Yep. That, used calling up his old show and breaking
Lance
balls with
Storm
him.
and Mike Awesome when Lance Storm didn't want to do any angles at the thing to build up a show, I remember.
Yep.
Mike Awesome was awesome, though.
There were a lot of great people that came in there. I mean, Diamond Dallas Page was a prince when he was in there.
Yeah, I remember Buff Bagwell. He was a prick.
The biggest prick still till this day was Lex Luger.
Oh, yeah, he was another one. Yeah.
He came in with, may she rest in peace, Liz. And we got a rider from WCW to the restaurant. Nobody was allowed to make eye contact with Mr. Luger or Miss Elizabeth.
Well, now you can anyway if you wanted to.
unless you got a shovel and a couple of flashlights. Oh, God, that's horrible.
I wasn't talking about her. I was talking about him. But
what about him? Well, you know who was always great too was Glacier. Glacier was a
Glacier, yeah. I always put him over as one of the nicest guys. The Torborg, who played the Kiss Demon.
He was great. Yeah, he was great.
Alex Wright. Alex Wright's my boy.
Your buddy. Yeah. Big Vito and Johnny the Bull, they were pretty nice.
There's a potpourri. There were so many guys that came through the pike there. I got to interview Bret Hart. I got to interview Ric Flair, where he got pissed off. He said he should be in the main event every night. And it's like he got mad that I say he should be in the main event some of the nights, that other people should be in there too. And he cut off the interview.
That's right.
But then he let me talk again. So,
Didn't you also, Waltman? Didn't you interviewed him too, didn't you?
I don't think so.
You did. But that was always,
Jarrett.
that was a great time. Jarrett, and the after parties at that place were just because when I got the job, they sat everybody down and they said, okay, who here knows about wrestling? And about 15 people raised their hands out of like the 40. And they said, okay, who really knows about wrestling? And then there were about 6 of us. And the first day that they had an autograph signing, I went up to the PR. What was that chick's name who used to bring in all the wrestlers from WCW?
Yeah, I don't remember.
You remember the blonde girl?
Yeah, because she was the one who cut off my interview with Scott Steiner, and he was like, "You're done already?" I'm like, "Well, they said to wrap it up," and he was like, "Fuck that. Ask your questions."
Yeah. And I went up to her and I said, "Hey, look," and I'm bullshitting her. So I ended up like basically running the autograph sign.
The liaison.
I was the liaison, which was, to me, the greatest thing in the world. I mean, Jimmy Hart was a prince. Brian Knobs was a prince. I mean, it really was a great time. And out of that, meeting Joe, and then 20 years later here at FSW. I've been over Joe's house, commentary. He lets me just so far in the house. I'm not allowed all the way in the house.
Yeah, no, that's
that's a little too comfortable.
Can't get behind the curtain.
That's right.
It's like,
but it really has been something that I never thought in my life I would do or get the opportunity to do. That really, we piss, we moan, we complain, but everything I've got to do has been amazing. From hosting the Hall of Fames to TV.
Beers and Body Slams, we had you host.
Beers and Body Slams. Tyshawn Prince almost killed me. It's been something.
All because you brought me and the kid a platter of chicken fingers from the Nitro Grill.
And that kid is just as annoying now as he was when he was 6, maybe a little more.
Incorrect. He's way more annoying.
He's like,
And just so listeners and viewers might not know, Joey DeFalco is the one who is transforming FSW into this.
Into what it is today. I don't even know how it existed without handling everything. You know, we just scraped by, barely able to survive until his blood, sweat,
His
and tears
blossoming.
into the country. Yes. Just
His,
ask.
his,
He'll tell you how he's made it what it is today.
Joe, as we wrap up, any final thoughts on Sal, what he means to you? And
yeah, he's a prick cocksucker. What do you want me to tell you?
Well, that's a good out. That's a good out right there.
You know, in honesty, it's like, you know, there's everybody has clicks. We have our trainers, and some prefer Sin, and some prefer Cody, and some prefer Remy, and some prefer Kenny. And I always have stayed close to the people I'm most comfortable with. And again, you know, with Sal E, met him at Nitro Grill. And what was it? Wasn't it Outlaw who was the one who put us together again because he told you about us?
no,
Wasn't Ray?
Gigi Severe.
Really? I thought it was
Because
Ray.
he posted the flyer of something, and I clicked on the comments and I saw Joe DeFalco, and there can't be two people in the world who have that same name, and that's when I messaged you.
And so it's like, it was at that point, like, we had, I wouldn't say a huge friendship, but I would be there once, twice a week, and he'd be the guy I'd talk to all the time, you know, and I would tell him about different ideas that those idiots should have did. And, you know, plus they were stuck in the Union Hall, so busboy Sal E was making 16 an hour as a busboy, and
To stand around.
you know, the payroll was so much, and they had to pay $250,000 a year just for the licensing, which, if you look at it, they weren't allowed to air ECW or WWE programming. So unless you're a ECW fan, how many times are you going to go there to look at Jim Duggan's fucking 2x4? Not, you know, so it was like, you could rely on the tourists, but how do you get the locals to come back and back? Because, you know, those chicken fingers were really good. The food was good. But we wanted to try to do a wrestling show in there featuring the younger guys, and nothing could be done. And it was like, change the name. Instead of the Nitro Grill, call it, you know, the Wrestling Cafe, because they spent just as much money bringing in Buff Bagwell than if they would have just brought in Buff Bagwell on their own.
And another big problem they had was, and they stopped this eventually, was when they first opened, if you wanted to get an autograph, you just had to stand in line.
Oh, that was the biggest thing. I remember.
So you didn't have to spend a nickel. You could just stand there. And some of these people would get there 7 o'clock in the morning for a 1 o'clock, you know, Ric Flair, or a 1 o'clock Sid Justice. And I remember I actually told them, and a few other people did too, you can't do that. Because you got to bring, so then it became like a $15 or a $10 minimum, you know, and then proof of, you know, your receipt. But then they would show the pay-per-views, and they would charge, what was it, like $25 or $30 to come in and watch the pay-per-view. And then you got like a cheeseburger and French fries. So it's like, it didn't always balance out, you know, to make any
like
real money.
There should have been a VIP line. Like, if you're sitting there eating lunch, you need to go to the front of the line. And I remember it was like 1,000 people for Rey Mysterio the first time.
Yeah.
There was more people for Rey Mysterio than Goldberg, Bret Hart, Sting, even Luger, who was big at the time, Ric Flair, like Rey Mysterio by far. And that line was wrapped around down the escalator. Yep. It was like, if I bought food, when I was done eating, I would have to get in the back of the line. Like, seriously? I just spent $42. And that was the biggest disaster of them all, was that they did not take care of the existing customer.
Were you there the night for the Bischoff Raven fiasco?
I was there, but I ended up leaving. which we should discuss on the next episode, the rise and fall of the Nitro Grill. Yeah.
Yes.
I was there for the Super Bowl party when the Tennessee Titans played the Rams.
Yeah, that was a good party.
Good free food for, I had like 4 people we went with.
So there used to be, after all the pay-per-views out here, they would always do an after party.
Okay.
And everybody showed up. And you know the famous night that Bischoff called everyone in the ring and is like, if you don't like it here, you can get the hell out. You ever hear that story?
Right. Yep.
Well, I turned the corner one night. It was me and Larry. What was it? Larry, right? Was that his name?
Yeah, Larry.
Larry.
One of the finest managers of all time.
We turn the corner and we hear just yelling. What the hell? And we turn around and there's Bischoff, there's Raven, just nose to nose, and we're like, oh, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And this is before cell phones, so you couldn't take a video of it.
Right.
Yeah, I was there earlier that night talking to Raven, I remember, and then I left, and then the next day, wasn't that when the Filthy Animals left or something?
Yeah. But the greatest man.
When it was like, yeah, Saturn, Eddie Guerrero, Malenko, and then I remember that Shane Douglas tried to leave, and then WWF didn't want him.
Right.
Right.
But the greatest man I ever met at that place, and I tell this story all the time, was Kurt Hennig. Kurt Hennig became not my buddy, but like he knew me by name. And when he came in, I took care of him, but he was the sweetest, nicest guy, tipped me better than anybody in that place ever tipped.
Every time I walked in, Sal E would tell me how great it was when a Kurt Hennig would walk in. And I remember Brad Armstrong in the drunkenest stupor I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Well, then there was that time when the West Texas Rednecks, when they came in to do their autograph signing, and old Barry Windham was a little, and poor Bobby Duncombe, they were a little,
yeah,
little
I remember
cockeyed
Bobby
too.
Duncombe too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good times.
Really quick, Joe, is there anything that stood out to you for the show you guys just had on Saturday? And by the way, anyone who missed the show, if you sign up for the network for $6.99 a month, you can check out the show that just happened this past Saturday. There's one coming up on Friday, as well as all the past content that is available on the FSW network. Was there a standout match or anything that stood out to you from Saturday night?
Actually, there was a few standout matches. It was really a good night. You know, Cepha and Class was really, really good. Class is, proven, he kind of stepped up, the level of competition, and he proved he's definitely, on track to be a top guy. A match that I thought was going to be under the radar, that I thought was going to be really good and that was Sin Bodie and Graves. It was as hard hitting as you're going to get. Sometimes with Sin, you get a little more of the comedy stuff, but this was more of a serious natural born killer style match that, I'd say go out of your way to check out. With Kenny King not being around, Shogun decided he just had enough of the unguided, talking about running the tag division. And then he got some help and, with probably his best friend. And we saw maybe a tag team down the line that definitely's got some value, Shogun and Hero Lou. I saw them a year or so ago when we did a Halloween Battle Royal, and they came out as the APA, and they just had that look, and they had this ability. And again, because of the friendship and working out together, and there was always together, it's like they're a tag team that I believe in the future, if we chose to go that route, could be one of the most dominant tag teams we had. And of course, we had our younger guys, and they all excelled, and they're getting their opportunities, and they're improving. But we even had it was a pretty loaded show. We had Hammerstone on hand, and he wrestled Sugar Brown, and Clutch wrestled Jay Vidal of the Bad Bitches, and it was just a solid show. The disappointing is we got to keep it invite only. It's more for the network, and there's a select amount of fans wearing masks that get to come in. But because of everything around, we have to limit it to like 30 people. So fortunately, it's pretty disappointing that there's so much stuff. We're hoping to start releasing the weekly episodes of FSW television, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. So people who haven't seen, they've been in and out, you can follow the storylines and, see what's going on. We have Hyperstreak and Remy Marcel scheduled in the finals of the Nevada State Championship, but we're trying to hold off because we're holding off hope. We might be able to at least get 100 people in there sometime in the future, and we haven't been able to do Against All Odds or Survival of the Fittest. And now, this past Saturday would have been No Escape, and we were thinking about doing it at the FSW arena, but that was before the governor cut down the numbers again. For a while it was, 50%, and that lasted 3 weeks. So, we got people from all over who want to work. We're talking with numerous companies about doing joint shows. I'm trying to put together a West Coast, collective, with some of the bigger companies on the West Coast, because we're fortunate. We have our own building that can fit 200, 250 people in there with a massive production setup that, GCW was very happy with the setup that we had for them. And there's a few people that are going to be coming in doing some empty arena stuff because, we've really transformed the arena into its own personal TV studio. So.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And again, please, I encourage everyone to sign up for the FSW network. Also, keep your eyes on the Twitch station. Sal E, it's been awesome having you on, brother. I hope we covered some of the stuff that maybe David didn't cover. And I probably get chewed out for saying, please check out David's show as well. I'm sure my boys are going to say, why are you promoting the other show? But
they won't watch his show if I'm not on it anyway. So, you're safe.
But for now, thank you guys so much. And everyone watching and listening, please, again, subscribe, download, like all the Vegas Bad Boys of podcasting stuff. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having me.
Later.
I'll talk to you whenever.
Yeah, I'll see you someday at the show.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.